moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You just crossed over into all Dente Creepypasta. Horror stories cooked to perfection with a splash of red sauce. My name is CZ, and I will be your server this episode. Anaheim, 2016. Amid the flash and flare of a bustling young amusement park at the peak of its growth, the Hollywood Tower Hotel was a star in its own right. But like all shining stars, there came a time when it would be eclipsed by a newer franchise. With the tower on its deathbed, people flocked to go experience it before it was too late. Let's dig right in. When I heard that the Tower of Terror at Disney's California Adventure was being remodeled into a Guardians of the Galaxy ride, I immediately made plans with my friends, Joey and Matt, to go pay the ride one last visit. We all decided to take a Monday off and visit the park on the last day of the ride's operation, in hopes that there might be some kind of special send-off. If you've never been to Disney, Tower of Terror was a part dark ride, part freefall ride, themed around an abandoned Hollywood hotel. Guests are told that they're entering a special episode of the Twilight Zone. 5 people riding on an elevator on one Halloween night in the 30s were struck by lightning, causing them and an entire section of the hotel to disappear into another dimension. Let me make one thing clear. I was never the type of guy who believes in ghosts. That's part of what made me love the Tower of Terror, though. The theming and effects were so well done that you really did feel like you were stepping into a dimension where ghosts do exist, and it was a lot of fun. As we walked through the Hollywood Boulevard area of the park towards Hollywood Tower, I was disappointed to see that they had already stripped off the walls, leaving behind a tower of scaffolding where construction workers were already at work transforming the outside appearance of the ride. As we turned the corner to the street where the tower was located, we were met with a huge line pouring way outside the ordinary queue area. Understandably, it seems like lots of other Disney fans had the same idea that we did, and wanted to give the ride a proper send-off. We decided to hit up some of the other rides first, and return to the Tower of Terror once the sun had gone down. This turned out to be a great idea, or so it seemed at the time, because most of the rest of the park was relatively empty in comparison. We ended up getting on just about everything else that we wanted to before returning to the Tower of Terror that evening. The tower was lit with those ominous glowing blue lights as we approached it for the final time. There was still a very long line when we got there, which we expected, so it was getting pretty late by the time we even hit the front gates of the attraction's official queue. Joey was starting to get nervous about us even making it in before the park closed, even though they were open late that night. We were actually one of the last groups to go through before they started turning people away. After welcoming us to the Hollywood Tower Hotel, a man in a bellhop uniform with dark circles under his eyes closed up the giant metal gates behind us, presumably never to be opened again. At first, I was feeling relieved to have made it in time to go on the ride, but I was quickly overcome with an uneasy feeling. Something was off. Before entering the building, the line winds through the main level terrace leading up to the building's entrance. I know the area is supposed to look worn down by the elements, but it looked even shabbier than usual. The plants were all overgrown, and some of the lampposts were broken, making it very difficult to see. I even came close to stepping on some broken glass on the ground, but the strangest part was the screaming. These were no ordinary theme park screams, though. They sounded like screams of agony, like someone was being tortured. We were wondering what was getting such violent reactions out of the riders, but eventually came to find that the screaming was coming from the speakers hidden around the area. I'm not sure if that made me feel any better, to be honest. Why would they be playing such disturbing audio for their guests? It all just seemed so weird. When we got to the covered area just outside the building, it seemed like the pillars holding up the structure had some considerable decay, and all the windows were broken. I couldn't remember exactly what this area looked like last time I was here, but I was fairly certain it was at least a little bit more put together than this. After what seemed like forever, we finally made it into the hotel. This is when things really got weird. Normally, the hotel lobby is made to look like it was abandoned in the 30s, which it still was, only this time, the room was filled with 15 to 20 Disney employees, all wearing the same Hollywood Tower Hotel bellhop uniform. They were standing straight up like soldiers all around the major set pieces in the room, and every single one of them was just staring at us. It was almost as if they were guarding something, but none of them said one word the entire time. Matt even tried asking one of the employees how much longer it would be until we reached the front of the line, to which the guy made eye contact with him and just stared into his soul with a completely straight face. I'll never forget the look of those blue eyes with the dark bags underneath, piercing at us from his pale, almost grayish skin. At this point, I was thinking that this all must be part of the park's special going-away present to the fans of the ride, and they were really going all out to make the last night as creepy as possible. I let myself think that they were really outdoing themselves, and I was enjoying the show.
I also noticed that the iconic owl statue in the center of the lobby was gone, and it was replaced with a sign that said, "The Silver Lake Sisters, live at the Tip Top Club." Only Tip Top Club was crossed out in red ink and replaced with the word lobby. At some point, some construction workers came in and tried to remove the sign and some of the other furniture.
This was the first time I saw one of the bellhops react and speak up. He grabbed the construction worker's hand and said, "Sir, please, the hour is not yet upon us." I assumed that this was also part of the show. I mean, they wouldn't really be clearing the place out minutes after closure, right? At this point, riders are taken in groups to the hotel library for a briefing video. Matt and Joey walked ahead into the library, but when I tried to pass through, the bellhop stopped me and told me to wait for the next group. I tried to explain that I was with those two guys, but the bellhop wouldn't let me pass. Matt and Joey didn't seem to notice I was gone, but I figured I would catch up with them before they boarded the elevator. When it was my turn to go see the briefing video, there were only a couple people left in line behind me, so the three of us went in. We get into the orientation room and the lights go out. We sit there in the dark for what seems like ages. That's when I hear someone shuffle around behind me. I could swear it was just me and those two other guests who had come into the library. I was positive that they were the only ones behind me in line. I had to think that whoever was behind me was just one of the employees. But then, seemingly just to disprove that theory, the guy moves closer to me and starts breathing down my neck. I was getting very uncomfortable, but then, just as I was about to say something, the orientation video starts. So I just take a step forward away from that creep behind me.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Behind it is another dimension. Dimension of sound, a dimension of sight, a dimension of mind.
I wasn't sure if there was something weird going on with Rod Serling's voice, almost like it was off-pitch or something.
You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
The rest of the introduction video went on as it normally does. That is, until it got to the part where Rod addresses the audience.
Tonight's story of the Twilight Zone will be your last.
Okay, now that was definitely not normal. They must have changed up the intro video for the final night or something.
This, as you may recognize, is a maintenance service elevator. Still in operation, but not for long. At midnight tonight, normal operation of this machine will cease, and at that moment, the stars will come out to play. When this happens, you will have to fend for yourself, and your safety is not guaranteed. You are about to embark on a ride through history, and your destination, the Twilight Zone.
All right, this is exactly why we wanted to come on the last day. I was so excited, I couldn't wait to find Joey and Matt and get on this ride. The doors opened, and we continued on to the boiler room, the last part of the hotel before we get into the elevator. The creep who was standing behind me didn't join us, however. I looked back and saw him just standing there in the dark. I couldn't see him that well. He was basically just a silhouette in this lighting, but I think I made out the outline of a bellhop uniform. Whatever. I scanned the boiler room for my friends, but I didn't see them anywhere. I hoped that they hadn't gotten on the ride without me. The more I searched around for them, the more I realized that the entire room felt kind of empty, at least considering how many people had just been in front of us. It was also freezing down here. I was getting goosebumps. I know it was January, but we were inside, and it was Southern California after all. It doesn't usually get this cold. The other two guys from the library and I were directed past the usual boarding stations up to a creaky stairway leading up. This was completely new to me. I mean, I remembered seeing these stairs before, but I always thought they were just a decoration to make the hotel feel more fleshed out than it really is. Or maybe one of those secret entrances for the cast members to access their changing rooms and whatnot. Apparently, I was wrong, and there are more elevator entrances up above, as well as more pipes, machinery, and theming. The only thing that wasn't up there was people. I tried to text my friends to see where they were at, but my phone was dead from a long day at the park. One of the employees led us to a station that was completely empty. We didn't have to wait long for the car to arrive. The elevator shaft doors parted and we entered the ride. I chose a seat towards the middle and the other two guys filled in on either side of me. The Tower of Terror starts by traveling up to the first floor, where the doors open and the guests see a mirror. The narrator then asks them to wave goodbye to the real world. When the doors opened for our ride, I saw a man sitting directly behind me, with what appeared to be a hunting rifle. This really startled me. Thinking it might have been some kind of effect, like the hitchhiking ghost in the haunted mansion, I turned back to see that there really was someone sitting there. It was the creepy bellhop guy again. At this point, I started to freak out. Not only was this the second time that this guy inexplicably appeared behind me, but he was carrying a weapon? I know Disney can have a dark side at times, but this is still Disney we're talking about, a family company. I was getting really scared that something was very wrong here, but what could I do? I was strapped into the seat. So I start to scream and panic. I don't remember exactly what I said, but
I do remember the ride violently jolting down a floor.
Next scene is a hallway full of guest rooms where riders are shown the ghosts of the 5 hotel guests who disappeared years ago. Only this time, the holograms look shockingly realistic, and they don't seem to notice us. They're just standing in the hotel talking. The audio isn't that loud, but they seem to be arguing with the employee about something, and the woman is sobbing. Again, it was difficult to hear over the rain and thunder, but she said something along the lines of, "Don't make us go." She's crying, begging and pleading, and the employee is just standing there with a disgusted look on his face. Before I can gather any more information, a huge flash of lightning fills the room. This may have been a special effect, but I distinctly remember feeling the heat of this lightning strike. What I saw when the smoke cleared completely devastated me. I saw all 5 of the bodies sprawled out on the floor in a disturbingly realistic death scene. The man seemed to have vomited all over himself, and the little girl's hair was standing up on end. But the creepiest part had to have been her eyes, which had rolled into the back of her head. Her eyelids seemed to be sparked open, and it was almost as if her blank stare was pointed right at me. I was completely at a loss for words, sounds, anything, when the ride jerked upward again to the top level. The ride stopped at the top, like it always does. It was dark. There were only a few main lights left on in the park. I guess the other major attractions were already shut down for the night. Instead of the usual audio, the narrator was just laughing like a madman. After a while, it went quiet and nothing happened. I was beginning to think that the ride was stuck, and to be honest, it was almost a relief after everything that I had seen. The moment of solace, however, was short-lived when I felt the man behind me, who I guess I had temporarily forgotten about in all the chaos, grab onto my shoulder. At this point, I knew there was nobody who could help me, but I was internally freaking out, and I didn't dare turn around and acknowledge what he was doing. Now I know that people are going to call me out and say that I made this story up for attention, and I know people are going to try to prove that most of these occurrences are absolutely impossible, and I can't really blame them for that. But what I saw next, even if it was just for a fraction of a second, has stuck in my mind perfectly since that night, and I'm 100% sure of what I saw. As the ride started to drop, and the man behind me increased the pressure on my shoulder, the on-ride photo camera flashed. And for a split second, I saw 3 construction workers hanging by the neck from the top pole upon which the camera is mounted. These were not holograms, and even though I only saw them for a split second, I'm quite sure that they were not props either. After that first drop, the elevator continued to bounce up and down at nauseating speeds. Between the G-force and the pressure of the man grabbing my shoulder, I felt like I was about to pass out. I actually started to black out and closed my eyes when I felt the ride come to a screeching halt. I was ready for this horrific nightmare to be over, but apparently the ride had other plans. Once I opened my eyes and regained my composure, I found myself on the 2nd floor, the one with all the guest rooms. The dead bodies were still there, but now they had ghosts standing over them, motioning for us to come closer. This was actually probably the most normal thing I had seen since getting on the ride, as it resembled the scene that usually takes place on this floor during normal operation. Then, to my surprise, our harnesses came off. I was essentially frozen in complete shock. What the hell was going on? The creepo behind me continued to hold my shoulder while the other 2 riders got out of their seats and casually walked through the door to the right, which, to this point, I wasn't even aware was a real door. I had always just thought it was a facade, much like the stairs in the boiler room earlier. After, I'm not exactly sure how long, I snapped out of my daze and realized this was my chance to get out. I wriggled myself free of the man's grasp and made a beeline for the right side door. It was locked. I banged myself against it, but it wouldn't budge, so I darted across to the left side door, glancing at the elevator car in passing. The man in the bellhop uniform was just sitting there, giving me this creepy, sadistic grin. To my surprise, the door on the left worked, and I slammed it shut behind me.
I stumbled up a seedy, narrow staircase,
at the end of which was another door. I bursted through, hoping to make it to the lobby or something, but instead found myself in an abandoned swimming pool. What in the world? I mean, How could this possibly exist here? I know for a fact that the pool has never been part of the ride, the queue, or any of the theming surrounding it. I vaguely remember a sign pointing to a pool on the beginning of the line, but come on, it was just a sign. Did I stumble upon one of those crazy Disney secrets, like Walt Disney's New Orleans Square apartment, or the fabled basketball court under the peak of the Matterhorn? Perhaps this pool was at one time an employee lounge of some kind? All the tiles were cracked, and the pool was filled with rust and who knows what else. There were a couple of dark objects at the bottom of the pool. I had to force myself not to look and assume that they were pool chairs or something, but I had a bad feeling in my gut about what they may actually be. Whatever it was, it looked disgusting and I wanted to get the hell out of there. I looked around for another exit, but the first thing I noticed was a lump across the pool. My first thought was that it was a dead body until I saw a guy stand up and start wobbling around like a drunk. He was wearing a hoodie and tattered jeans. My initial impression was that this was a homeless guy who had somehow snuck in and was living here. When he saw me, he started screaming at me. He kept saying, "You can't take my home," and cursing at me. He was clearly intoxicated. As soon as I figured out where the door was, I made a mad dash for the exit, which may have in fact been an entrance because it led me to a dimly lit locker room. I guess that if that was one time a pool for employees, that this must be the corresponding locker room. The lockers were pretty small, and most of them were open and empty. The only sound I could hear was that of running water on the far side of the locker room in the dark. After all that I'd experienced, I thought it might be best to approach the door on the other side of the room more stealthily. I was also feeling very sick and needed to catch my breath. I still felt like I was going to pass out. I walk over to the source of the water, keeping my footsteps as quiet as possible. There are a few shower stalls up ahead. I poke my head into the first, and it's empty. I proceed, continuing to check on the second, third, and fourth stalls. But what I see in the fourth stall stops me dead in my tracks. In the corner of the shower, an old man stands in the shower's stream. He's naked, senile, and borderline deformed, and he has his head buried in the corner. Luckily, he doesn't seem to notice me, so I decide to tiptoe past him to get to the door. I make it across safely, but as I grip the door handle, I hear a terrifying cry out from behind me.
I see you. You'll never get me out of here. You're the one who has to go.
I hear wet footsteps charging out of the shower stall behind me, and waste no time yanking the door open and fumbling my way through the next room in the dark. This leads me back to the original mirror room. The elevator car from the ride is now there, seemingly just waiting for me. The creepy bellhop guy is in the same seat, continuing to stare me down. I don't even bother to stop running across the mirror room, through the door on the other side. Now I'm in another hotel corridor, but different from the one upstairs. At the end of the hall, I see a woman and yet another bellhop character, this one wearing a red pair of Mickey Mouse ears with an Iron Man logo on it. The two are having a dispute. She's screaming and grabbing onto the sides of the doorframe as he violently tries to pull her out of the room. She's screaming, "Please, don't make me go," and he would just methodically respond by telling her that her stay is up and she's welcome to check into one of their other hotels. He then yanked her hard enough for her to lose grip on the door, and she flew across the hallway, crashing her head on the wall hard enough to draw blood. She collapsed on the floor in front of him. That's when he looked up and noticed me, with the same intense stare that the bellhops down in the lobby had given us. My vision was starting to get blurry, so I decided to go into one of the rooms to see if I could buy myself some time. I assumed that all of the doors were fakes, but was pleasantly surprised when one of them actually opened, leading to yet another corridor. I was too tired to try to comprehend how this was possible, given the layout of the ride, and given the fact that these secret rooms have no reason to exist in the first place. Just then, the room went dark, and the walls, floor, and ceiling became projection mapped with the starry night sky, the same effect used in the second floor of the actual version of the ride. At the end was a single door. I took this as the metaphorical exit to the Twilight Zone, so I ran to it as fast as I could. As I was running, I heard the narrator's booming voice one last time.
Next time you try to mess with history, make sure you know just what kind of vacancy you're filling, or you may find a few nasty surprises coming your way. You may or may not have made it through tonight, but to close this door is to forever live on in your head in the Twilight Zone.
And just like that, it was over. The sound of the 30s soundtrack played in my ears, and I was making my way down the stairs, trying to think about if Joey and Matt had had a similar experience to what I had. And what happened to those two strangers? What if I was the only one to make it out? Who would believe me? A light caught my eye. The ride photo. At the top of the drop, the guy was grabbing on my shoulder, not to mention the hanging bodies that would also probably be in frame. I ran up to the preview screen. If I needed proof, this would be it. But when I looked at the photo, it was just me and the two other guys. No creepy bellhop, no bodies, just a regular ride photo. The gift shop was completely devoid of any gifts or people, so feeling defeated, I passed through and met up with my friends. As I had feared, they made no mention of anything abnormal and asked if I was okay. A regular Disney employee in a yellow button-down shirt informs us that the park is closing and to make our way to the exits. We walk out of the park. I turn back to see the lights coming down in the Tower of Terror one last time. There are already cranes in place, ready to start ripping pieces off the structure. Other than that, though, it looks completely normal from the outside. No hanging bodies at the top, nothing out of the ordinary. Before turning back, I see a window open on one of the floors near the top. I stop walking. Joey asks what's gotten into me as I stare back at the ride for the final time. A light shines out the window, and the silhouette of a bellhop sticks his head out and waves at me. I don't plan on going back to ride the new Guardians of the Galaxy ride when it opens. I believe in ghosts. Thanks for listening to All Dente Creepypasta. Your total comes out to $19.39, but if you like this video right now, I'll waive that fee and give you everything you just listened to absolutely free. Remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every other week, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.